Hi, my name is Theodore Cottingham, and I suggest to you the way we have known God is through our logic. We have known God through our mind. And now we are learning to bypass that mind and come into the real Holy of Holies. Now, understanding a lot of things we've not understood. We haven't known how to deal with our grief, the wounds of each other. We haven't understood how to interpret so many writings of the ancients that tried to give us insight into things. A lot of misinterpretation, misinformation has been disseminated. And we become who we are. But I don't want to remain who I am today in flesh, with the foibles, becoming feeble, surrendering to die, inexorably marching to the cemetery. That is not my hope. And my hope is no longer after I die. My hope is in me, the real me. The me that existed before time began. The me that is you. The me that exists in God before God was a thing. Before there was a thing called God. Before what we imagine to be God in our mind, with some kind of image, backing it up with words of a book or words of a man or woman. Before we let words image God to us, before we were incarcerated in flesh or a magnetosphere of this magnetic earth, we were us, one mind of. We were God before God was. You see, God is a concept. It's a word. It's a noun. It's what you mean it to be. But we've not had a framework for understanding God. So we've languished in our definitions. We've languished in our quest to know who we are and become better, more hopeful, better educated, all the time. Minds being in turmoil and competition, ragged, tattered, trying to be successful in our own eyes, wanting the blessing of God, wanting the acceptance of other people, wanting to do good. But there's more to the story. There's more to the story. And you see, when we have truth, when we have a piece of truth, when we have an insight, a revelation, If we don't understand it and we interpret it wrong, it doesn't bring us light. It brings us darkness. We may interpret it one way when the real meaning is quite another way. For example, God never changes. How ludicrous. But let us examine that. Let us think about it, and let's not our logic control us, but let us use our logic to see a different story. You see, let us use our mind instead of our mind using us that's closed us into this vessel. There's another way to live. Got to turn this heater down. You see, I teach, and I've been teaching for years. I've been writing the first person words of God for 21 years. I've been making these videos and recordings, and over this time I've changed. My message has changed. What God has given me has changed. Because I suggest to you, in learning to let God teach me directly, God has grown me up to the point of where I am me. Now, I personally haven't arrived at my destination. Or is there a destination like we have been taught, that we get some information, we say some magic words, and we have this intangible magic transformation that is supposed to make all our ills go away, but it doesn't, and we still live in turmoil, and we still learn to pray, we learn to worship, we try to do everything, or at least a lot of us do, to be accepted into the faith, to be acceptable when we die. But folks, there's more. I suggest to you, as you begin to know God intimately, you will change. You will let go of some things. You will prune the tree of life that's between your ears. And your life, your tree of life, understanding now the allegory of so many things that we have held so dear to us so tightly because we thought they were from God, or we knew there was more, and we wanted to be acceptable. And I am not making it. I did that. I taught it for decades. But I began a quest out of my desperation, out of my pain, out of my curiosity. There were so many things that people quoted as justification for their actions that didn't seem to add up to me. And I imagine there's a lot of them for you too, for many people. Many sincere people that keep sweeping their questions under the rug. They keep separating themselves from who they really are. Because so often when we begin actually asking serious questions, serious-minded questions about things that really matter, that don't seem to add up, so often we're simply bashed by the establishment. We're bashed by those in authority. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to question me? Why are you questioning the Bible? Da-da-da-da-da. And all this tonnage of shame is put on us by those who are supposedly leading us to the kingdom of heaven. And yet I say unto you, the kingdom of heaven is within you. The kingdom of God is within you, and God is in the kingdom of God. So therefore, God is in you. And if you're not in sync with God, if your mind is at war with God, if your mind is at war with you, you are with war with God. The turmoil in heaven takes place between your ears, not up yonder. Hell is not down there. It's all right here between our ears, our mind. And this idea of a soul, redeeming a soul, saving a soul, goes bye-bye. Let not your soul eradicate your light. Your soul operates by the mechanical mind with the programming of the words of man. Words are algorithms that turn the levers, the cranks, the gears. Okay? But there's more to the story. I'm happy to say, I'm happy to refute the understanding that God doesn't change. I'm happy to apply an understanding that may help you because it certainly helps me. No one changes as much and as fast with such delight as God, the mind of God. What doesn't change is what true God is, that loves you, me, and each other equally, of every nation, tribe, and tongue in this universe and farther. And that doesn't change. But the mind of God grows. The mind of God changes. The mind of God is you, who will be not separate from it too. The mind of God is a collective. And it's not a collective of those at war with itself. The original seed is still connected to original God before God existed as a deity, a sacred thing that we think is so holy. We can own the only right response is to worship it. But what if that original God is your parent, your creator that actually created you? What if that's true? Do you really think what it is, wants your worship? Or does it desire interaction with you? I have 2 kids. I don't want them to worship me by any means. I don't want them to be just what I am. I want them to excel me. All those years they were growing up, part of my vision was that when they grew up, that we would be friends. But my real goal and why I did so many things was I wanted them, in one sense, how can I say it? I wanted them to start their adult life with what I knew. I didn't want them to have to learn everything that I had to learn the hard way. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And I didn't want them to reinvent the wheel. And believe me, I had to reinvent a lot of wheels because I was not taught. And a lot of things I was taught I didn't learn very well. And a lot of things I learned very well, I learned wrongly. I didn't understand the application. I didn't understand the information. It's not that I was wicked, I was ignorant and undisciplined a lot of times. But when my kids came along, I had a lot of motivation, and I changed a lot. I began to realize when my kids were toddlers and see how fast they were growing, I realized they can't come. They couldn't come as toddlers into my world. But I could go into theirs. And I began to read books and think and ponder. And I would play in the floor with them, right? And their little toys. I would play with everything from little rattlers to little things suspended all around and models of the planets. And, as the years go by, the gifts change, the toys change, and I change how I interact with them as they grow. And I'm growing, and I'm helping them grow into my world. And I'm hoping that they mature and become self-sufficient, successful, whatever that means maybe, but not codependent on another. No longer having a mind that is dependent on something else. But I desired that they have poise and confidence, that they have knowledge, that they received an education, not just from someone else, but from me. I wanted them to have the knowledge I had. And I didn't want them programmed to receive the pains I had walked through. So I suggest to you, I'm not alone in this. I'm not alone in the way I approached it. And I offer you that analogy to say what God is, what we have called God. Well, what we call God, even to worship it, doesn't matter. Our heart matters. What our motive is, what our heart is, and what we're calling God for communication's sake changes all the time. The information to us changes. Realize this. Important, crucial. The information that God gives us and even speaks to us directly as we seek to know God intimately, to know the mind of God, that God will speak, God will communicate, an energy will be perceived. And if you want to, if you're willing, if you have the guts, you'll begin to write what God gives you because you'll value it. But here's the point of this. The human mind experiences what it perceives as the joy of revelation. God gave me this, the words of God. This is it. This is how I live my life. End of story. And we clamp down on it. We clamp down on these interpretations. There's a certain set of words and a few experiences we have. And we get stuck like quicksand in those experiences and those interpretations. And in communities that do so, it's all magnetic. The magnetic mind wants to latch on to you. It wants to control what you know, what you do, how you do it. It wants to control your motive. It wants to be in charge. All of that's ego. All of that's wrapped up in ego. And all of ego comprises what I'm calling the soul. So I'm redefining soul. And I'm saying there's an energy, there's a presence. Light, coherent light, an energy that doesn't need the waves of molecular propagation. God before God was. I suggest we are created by, all of us are the offspring. And I said yes to you, that on planet Earth and all of the zillions of people we seem to have at the moment and who have come through here and maybe coming through here, this thing called Earth, we're all the offspring of God and connected to God, and the God seed is within us. But our tendency is that innate within us programmed desire to be our own mind, control our own circumstances, and not learn from our father, our mother, God. What about considering the word God is so ambiguous. There's so much ambiguity around God and what the word applies to, who the word applies to. But I suggest to you, the idea of the living word is a flow of energy. And that flow of energy cannot be concretized in a book. I've written 2 books. There's truth in those books. But as I wrote down the truth, I wrote down what I was experiencing, and I wrote down the revelation at that time. Now, the paradigm is changing to no longer be static. If you know much about financial statements, you'll know when you start studying the balance sheet it reports a snapshot in time, a moment. It's a picture. Click. And that's a financial position at one moment of cash, payables, receivables, inventory, et cetera, at that moment. But then a very different financial statement called the income statement is not really the opposite, but it's very different. It's not a snapshot in time. It's a picture of over generally 12 months or quarter, several years or whatever. But generally, financial statements, what I'm talking about now, is over time. So the financial statements comprise a snapshot in time, the balance sheet, and the income statement over a period of months. This was the income, this was the expenses in these different categories, and this was net income for this period. Okay? I suggest to you that revelation and so many of the writings of things that have even been wonderful, accurate, and even understood, applied to that moment, not to apply forever. You see, there's an understanding. if there's a maturity that comes into place, a maturity of love, a maturity of revelation, of how to receive revelation and mature in that revelation. And I suggest to you, revelation is the road, the path we are on now, instead of being locked down. The paradigm of the past is powerless to affect change, to bring into existence the new birth, as I know it. The new birth that will actually birth you in privilege to be the real you, no longer condemned by your machine. I no longer condemn me. I no longer stand in sin. I no longer need a mediator. I don't seek all the things that I sought, that I thought Jesus did for me, because I realize now how to apply the story in a different way. So I've changed. I change. The story, the story, in one sense, of Jesus may be the same as it was, but the application of it to your life grows. There is a momentum. We are no longer stuck in inertia. We are no longer placated in a pew. We are coming into the knowledge of God to be it. We're coming into the knowledge of God to be not separate from God. We are learning how to not just pray to God to do things for us. We are beginning to learn the value of so many words of Jesus, especially. Just like one, John 14:12, Jesus said, if you believe in me, you will do the things I do and greater. Well, that seems to set up a goal for us, doesn't it? Takes more belief. Takes more faith, not. It takes becoming. And to, pardon me, and to become. We don't come with faith. We come with surrender as a little child to learn. And just like I taught my kids day after day after day, and many times over the years thinking, what happened? We're not communicating. I had to change. See, the teacher changes in a way to lead the pupil, the student. The communication has to be at the level that you're open to. I can sit here and tell you things that seem so outlandish, you may never want to hear my voice again. Things that sound so unbelievable that we are yet to do, because we decide to grow up and to begin to let our mind no longer be separate from the mind of the original source energy. God, before God was a concept in language, before the Tower of Babel ever took place, before the Genesis 2, before the creation, before the Lord God created anything. When source light, source energy, it doesn't matter what you call it in words. except for communication purposes. Because that which is still I am. And I am the great I am, the I am that was and is and to come is here. The I am, that original source energy, has never been separate from you. My friend, I suggest to you, when you get up in the morning and go look in the mirror, no matter what you think of that face, it's the face of God. We haven't known it. We've been taught we were separate, and we believed the lie. We believed there was a satanic thing, some kind of animal spirit, something very powerful that we all attributed some type of manifestation in our imagination to bring forth the concept of the devil. Oh, and beware of false teachers. Remember, think about what's implicit there. You're so fragile. Beware of a false teacher. You may hear something that's not true, and you may believe it. Look out, look out, look out. Wait a minute, grow up. I want you to analyze things. I want my kids to think for themselves. I want them to choose. Well, I desire for them to choose rightly. Just like John 7:24, Jesus said, judge. He didn't say, judge that you be not judged. Wait a minute. Whose words do you value? Another writer, or do you value the words in red? Jesus said judge. What does judge mean? Make a decision based on the evidence. Jesus said judge, but judge righteously. And that's what I desire for my kids. Righteously. We don't have to put all this stuff in a religious context. In fact, it's time we brought it out of the religious context. It's time we brought it out of the Bible. Into the real world, the 3D world. But is the 3D world really real? Or is the spiritual world the real world? Or is the spiritual world the quantum world? I suggest to you that the paradigm of power is the path within. And it's not by holiness ascribing power to a God that is not you. If you want to do the things that Jesus did, if you're even willing to be taught by God directly, there's a time and a place and a process. It's both a moment and it's a process, like the balance sheet and the income statement that I spoke of. It's over time and many moments of surrender where we begin to listen, we begin to accept, we begin to come as a child and perceive the energy of the mind of God, surrendering to learn, surrendering to apply ink on paper, and over time, your word will be a lamp unto your feet, a light unto your path that leads you out of temptation, bringing you in to your promised land, the land within, the land that cannot be conquered with failure or even molecules, but only entered by love. And that begins with love for yourself. Not letting your soul dominate you any longer. No longer disparaging the one in your mirror. No longer putting the one in your mirror through torment to be acceptable to another person or another God. And as we begin to live love and destroy our union with things that put us in turmoil, that destroy our peace, we begin to grow righteously. We begin to grow in stature, the stature of God. We change our energy. We begin to grow. And I suggest to you, how shall I say it? God grows God. Acceleratedly. And exponentially if you will let the Creator be created in you again to be not separate. The mind of God reproducing, replicating the mind of God in its creation to be completing the desire stated in John 17, where Jesus said, that all may be one. One mind, one consciousness. That consciousness creates with the words instead of us letting words rule our consciousness. The consciousness of God will synchronize the consciousness of God in you, growing it up, and it's a process. And the God of now God shall be, not another. What we're coming into is not the knowledge of power, being powerful in someone else, or a God, or a concept, or a machine. Not even the machine we wear on our head, as our head. We're no longer dependent on the flesh mind, the mechanical mind, the one that has all the neurons, all the axon hillocks, all the electromechanical, physiological, chemical interactions that try to determine our consciousness. There is a consciousness of God that transcends all matter. You're not subject to matter. But we think we are because we don't know the story, because we haven't lived the love that allows us to enter our temple, to be taught directly, to sync our mind with the mind of God. That's worth writing. Really? You see, I share these words not for entertainment, not for you to like me or to follow me. I speak these words creating a school. And I invite you into it. And to see these times that I speak like this. And prepare for them. Pick up your pen and make notes. And the key words, key phrases. Key words, key phrases. You write down. And I invite you to listen to this video again after it's done. I recorded thousands of videos, and many of them, most of them by far, I've listened to multiple times. To then go back with my pen and tablet and make notes of key thoughts, key phrases, connections. I would write down on a yellow tablet words and phrases. And in the left margin, I would write down the minute. Like I'd come down, and if something was said that I may want to reference later, at 7 minutes and 30 seconds, I would write 7:30, 11:40. I would write all these numbers in the left margin. And I would date the page. And I would number the pages. And I would come back and have sometimes 6, 8, 10 pages. And many times I would lay all the pages out on a table. And then I would take my pen and I would begin to ponder, and very patiently, without rushing the process, without rushing God, without rushing your mind, you, regardless of what you think you are or that God is, taking time to then, with these 6, 8, 10 pages, begin to assemble the picture. And in the assembling process is the assimilation of what's being said. Beginning to understand the flow of this energy that will lead you as a child, if you come as a child, and lead you into maturity. So there is a process in maturing that you must come to learn, to no longer be stuck in some things that you thought were so sweet, so great, so everlasting, enduring, that would never change. Like classical physics. The mind of God is advancing, maturing. And whoever will advance with it will become it. This is where the two become one. This is the marriage. Two becoming one. This is what becomes one mind. Because this process that I've been talking about this whole time, and in so many ways and so many recordings or aspects, and in this one, maybe a little more assembled, maybe a little more understandable for some. But you see, when you begin writing the first person words of God, when God begins to teach you directly, you come face to face with religion and God, and you choose. Because religion says this, 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 and this. God is this, the Trinity is this, the Bible is this, you are this, you're going to do this, and you should do this way. Religion is compartmentalized, it is run by rules. This is just like the Matrix. And yet there is an energy that develops maturity that says, well, I know you know how to add 2 and 2 and get 4, but would you believe there's something called negative numbers? Are you willing to learn how to deal with differential equations? Oh, and actually, we use a lot of words and numbers, but a lot of symbols. And there's a periodic table of elements. And oh, wait a minute, we discovered quantum particles. You see, There's change. There's growth. This is the garden of confusion no longer. We are in the garden of creation, and we are responsible for us. And I've said many things in these moments that I hope help you put together a frame of reference that doesn't leave you out of creation being the creator of it. We're learning not to be any longer hung up on words of the past and still value them, to be able to glean from them at times, but realize there are many new interpretations, new definitions, because we are seeking correction to learn to be who we really are. The angelic race of one. So what's our goal? I'll tell you mine. It's certainly not to inexorably surrender to becoming increasingly decrepit and surrender what I've looked at in the mirror to be put in a cemetery. I think there's a new birth. A new birth that no longer limits me. I birth again into what I really am. And what I really am is that intangible energy that I reach back for way back before time began, the original source energy that I'm the seed of, that you're the seed of, that we are the seed of that consciousness before the Big Bang. There's no room for complacency. But there is a lot of room for increasing curiosity. Willingness to ask questions. A willingness to write. A willingness to learn. A willingness to study. This is school. I've changed the name of this school I don't know how many times over the 21 years. I started out calling it the University of the New Covenant. And at one point I call it the University of Light. I call it the University of Light, Love, and Peace. I call it the School of Christ. I call it the School of the 21st Century Christ. And then I call it the School of God. And now I call it the School of Me. I suggest to you, God is the most humble of all. Because God, what God really is, not imaged by us, what God is. Let me give you a picture. What God is will come get in the floor with you and play. And actually, maybe sometimes tickle you. Play with our toys with us to help us understand that love. That love that does not shield us from who we are. That love that says, I will never leave you or forsake you. I will never condemn you. Take the thought of hell and banish it from your kingdom of thought. Hell? There's no hell. Not with what I am speaking of. Original source energy. But there are many around you that will create you in their image. A lineage of generations would love to rule your life with their thought, their images, and what they conditioned themselves to live in the consciousness of. But my friend, I invite you to the consciousness of one, where you create you again. And it is not in arrogance, it is with humility, where you become the most humble of all, where you come without any pretense whatsoever. You no longer carry your Bible high or some book or some theory. You're no longer in some kind of fatigues, and you no more experience fatigue. You simply come as a simple, common, ordinary person and begin to say, here I am. Teach me. Teach me. Teach me, O God, and teach me to teach. It doesn't matter what you call God. What matters is your heart, the motive, not controlled by your soul, but that which does not live or require the energy of magnets, electricity, the magnetic world, the molecular world. I've said a lot. And God now is to be understood, not by just the documents of the past, and not just by the experiences of the past, but a new and living nature that comes forth effervescently every day. The infinite, unlimited, will teach you directly. I teach you like this, if you so choose to be taught by me this way, for you to learn your unique path, listening to the voice, perceiving the energy, learning to receive and surrender and write. Write. But if you don't value what you write, but if you begin to value it, it takes on meaning because you attribute meaning and you appropriate it. With your intention, you create that value. You value what you want to, folks. And if we begin to value our consciousness in this way, to begin to receive and increase in the knowledge of how to receive and perceive and grow in this knowledge, we will take time to study. And as we study and assemble these messages, these lessons, yes, even these lessons that I give you, and I have over 1,000 videos on YouTube now. They're here, not for you to be a follower. They're here for you to eat the truth and not leave behind the old, but to draw from it also. Just as the Bible says, those instructed in the kingdom of God will draw forth from the old and the new and realize the flow of change. So you see, in understanding the Bible, understand it's valuable. Yet it's not the final picture. It's not the final understanding. As we begin to learn, to mature in how we understand things, a lot of those understandings will be changed quite a lot. And we will learn It has a lot more value than we thought it did, but in a different way because it's really portraying not the revelation of the Son, who was the only Son, and that there are no other sons, and that he did everything for us. There's a different picture. And we begin to see Jesus the pattern. And we begin to understand. We begin to be taught directly by God to learn how to do the things that Jesus did. So Jesus' prayer is not futile. It's not an empty prayer. That we may become one and that we may do the things that Jesus did and greater. God changes. The mind of God grows. It's always in motion. It's never static. There's never any stagnant cesspool in the mind of God. And you're not separate from it. No matter how much you try to crush it, no matter how much you war against it. You can ignore it. You can bash it. And you can take it to a grave. But my friend, you have the energy of creation within you. The spectrum of the complete Christ, the complete crown of light, the crown of life. The crown that knew no sin. Sin is only separation. That knew no separation. This crown is what we're coming into to wear because the King of Kings is no longer keeping the king out of the temple with other people, keeping the kings ignorant of who they are. You're invited to the palace of light this day. You're invited to sit at the table with the King of Kings, where the King of Kings will not condemn you. But instruct us all to bring the robe, the scepter, and crown. There is no condemnation for you, my friend. And there is no finality of life, for you are eternal, immortal. And you are creating you this moment. Let it be in the garden of confusion no more, but the garden of creation between your ears. And let there be light from light to light your path through your words and be the living word this day. I love you. And the God of now, the now God, shall be a race, because it shall be understood as a race, all of us with one mind. The consciousness of God, conscious of light, conscious of advancing the kingdom of God, conscious of the cosmos and not afraid of it, consciousness of all these other alternatives, but no longer fearing some false teacher or some image of God or image of the devil or hell either. You, my friend, become your new creation entering you, and that's now God. Creation is creating itself all over again. And we're here. And now shall be the time when many shall say, all manner of things in ways only controlled by other people. But you, my friend, are not subject to the words, the algorithms, the perpetrated energy that wants to brand you to be their image of. We are learning a different language. A language that needs not syllables, It's not the language of faith. It's not the language of the Bible or the old, but the language of the new that doesn't need syllables is the language of light. Light, coherent light. Light that permeates love, and love permeates. Because the word of the original source energy is no longer relegated to the past, no longer relegated to an image of God, no longer relegated to another entity, but the energy of what God was before we ever called it God communicates with us as children to grow us up, teaching us to learn how to learn as we teach each other. And this, my friend, is a school, the school where you learn to become the teacher. You learn to become the teacher of you this day, where you begin to learn to write, and you begin to speak like this and record and make notes and value your words to assemble and assimilate, creating the crown of righteousness, the mind that no longer needs the energies of the molecular world. And this is the creation process that you, as the creator, begin to create you with to become the regal royal, no longer limited to flesh once you experience the birth of the Christ of the past, the Christ of the now. The Christ, not the Christian of, because they condemn each other. That's their starting point. There's no Viking, but I've addressed all that. You, my friend, what's coming forth now is the paradigm of power, poise, confidence, permeated with surrender, radiating love. And the radiance of love and the power of light that loves all equally is going forth from this earth and farther, and to all in this earth to choosing to regress into their humanity and inexorably go to death, or create the new creation of the unlimited them that God was all the time, that we didn't know was us. We suffered amnesia. We suffered others doing their best to erase our mind and to program us with theirs. But now we know better, and we're learning. I'm Theodore Cottingham with the School of Me. And it's so common to say, I hope you enjoyed this, hope it's meaningful. But what I really hope is that you begin to ask questions and cultivate your curiosity, and you begin to surrender. You begin to increase your willingness to let God teach you directly, no matter what you call God. You can call God Ralph, Judy, but no longer Ichabod. For the glory has not departed. And the glory you will no longer refute if you're willing to be humble enough. Let God play with you as a child in the floor, like my example of me with my kids earlier. Let God teach you and realize it's a growth process, for God grows God. The kingdom of God is advancing. The cosmos is not standing still. The energy of faith will not take you where you want to go if you want to go into who and what you really are to enter your kingdom. So this is a story. I'm redefining everything. Let it not be said that you separate from the real you to you. So as I said, when you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror, no matter how haggard or human you may look or feel, the real you wears glorious light that cannot be contained here anymore by the words of man. We're coming out into a new creation, and it will be me and many and millions will receive this joy of the message, that the message all the time was about you and me. And we are no longer limited to this earth. There's no purgatory, hell, or heaven. There is no condemnation for you who will love me. And who am I? I am of every nation, tribe, and tongue on the earth and farther. Be not dismayed at the news, for your power cannot be constricted by any nuclear force or strong force other. I share with you my love for you to love you. Forgive you of everything you have done and not done. And be willing to enter the regal. Because when you see the kingdom, it takes more than knowledge to enter it. You become it. You become the mind of God. And now God shall not be ignorant, and we shall no longer be a race waiting for God to come. We will be teaching each other with the mind of the complete, that which was, I am, and coming shall be here now. Thank you for letting me share these words with you. Thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed to this channel on YouTube, please do. And if you so choose, subscribe at our website. Commit to be a student. The website is theschoolofme.com. And I love you. Please share these words right. And please live your life and not a lie someone else has told you. Please live you, the original you, that is now, not in service to another, but walking in the power and might of your glory, healing the earth, doing the things Jesus did and more, because we love each other. Good day. Thank you again. Share these words if you will, beginning to write your own as well, the first person words of you. Thanks, love. Good day.